Hi gang, it's Scott, the Fixing Old Bikes guy. I'm coming to you from my new workspace, my kitchen, and today I'm going to show you how to do a common upgrade or accessory that a lot of people will buy for, especially in America, because most bikes don't come with this. We're going to add some aftermarket plastic fenders, and I'm going to add mine to this my Cannondale hybrid here. I'm actually going to replace these fenders. I had some fenders on here before, and I'll show you those too. But this is kind of it's basically a clean job to do. I advise anybody that does this, if they're not super mechanically inclined, or even if they are, it's kind of a fun thing to do. It's just to take your time, do it right, and I think you'll be happy with the results. So here we go. First I want to show you the old fenders. I had these on, and my luggage rack, which I had to take off, which I will put back on after I install the new fenders. I had these for a few years. I had kind of had to modify them. I added this little mud flap thing myself, but I decided to upgrade and get a different pair of fenders on this bike. I'm actually going to keep these. I'm going to recycle them, pun intended. They might end up on another bike or a future bike. But the new fenders and tools and things that I'm going to use, here's the new ones. And here's some tools and extra hardware. I always recommend to hold on to hardware whether you use it or not. I'm not going to need all these wrenches obviously, but this is just a sample of what you would usually need to work on or install in accessories. They're all metric, of course, or even if you have one of these little multi-tools, sometimes you can just get by with this, although I recommend using separate small hex keys like this, because a lot of times when you're working on parts of your bike, if you use something like this, you may not have access to turn it the way you want to turn it. I'm also going to use a drill, because I'm going to drill a hole or two in these fenders, and I'll show you why. This is the hardware that came with the fenders. I'm not really going to use it, but I'm going to save it. This is hardware that I'm going to reuse. I took it off the bike when I took the old fenders off. And in this case, these are all stainless steel screws. Now, as a disclaimer, in my case, I'm not going to use this, but if you use stainless steel fasteners, you may want to use what they call anti-seize paste on them, because if you're putting like stainless steel hardware into something like aluminum or regular steel, you may have like a reaction over time, and you may not be able to get those fasteners back out. Personally, I've never had that problem, but I thought I'd mention that just in case. Now, for this kind of work I'm doing, I'd recommend that you clean your bike, especially the frame, really well. As you can see, it's pretty clean, it's polished and everything. Mainly because it can be a clean job to do anywhere, or you don't want to force any dirt or grit into these threaded holes. And you can see in this case I got the usual chainstay holes. I also have a threaded hole in this bike down here for fender mount. And unique to this bike, because of the frame design, I also have a threaded hole in here, and I'm going to actually have to drill a hole in my fender, hopefully that will line up with that, and then I'll be able to screw that in there. It'll look really nice when it's done. Yeah, I'm going to do the front wheel first, but when I do all the initial attaching of the fenders, I'm not going to tighten everything down first, because when I initially hang the parts on to position things in the final assembly, I have to put the wheels back on. You want to have a consistent clearance between the fender and the wheel. but sometimes you may have limitations with according to the design of the frame you have. So, but like I said, I'll do the front wheel first here. Now this is designed, and my instructions say that this should go in the front of the fork, but I like to put it in the back because then I get more coverage on the back of the tire. I want as much coverage as possible because if you're riding in a puddle or rain, you don't want that splash up on your drivetrain or on your feet, your shoes to get wet. So I'm just gonna put this screw through the hole here. It had 2 holes, and I'm gonna put like a little spacer. This is actually a part to my brakes. I have extra parts, so I'm going to actually use this as a spacer because it's going to protect my my paint job back here. And I'll just kind of hang that. And I got like a lock washer and a star washer, and just like a hex nut here. And like I said, right now I don't know. See, I got plenty of room to work with. I usually will put it probably as far up as it will go. But like I said, I'll just leave it like that for now. Okay, if you haven't already, if these aren't already loose, you want them, just back them off so that you can move your little stays in here. You don't want to lose these parts, though. It's a kind of a unique little screw there with the hole going through. But you want to just kind of locate where it's going to go, obviously. And here's my my hardware. And when you start these screws, they should start easily. If you have some dirt or grit or something in there, you don't want to like ruin your threads or whatever. You want things to go in there nice and clean. Make sure, like you said, if you're reusing fasteners, make sure that the threads are pretty clean there too. Okay, what I've done now, I pretty much moved this fender as far back as I think it's going to go safely. I got this up. Like I said, I haven't tightened anything. Now I'm just going to put the wheel in. And of course I have to turn the nut a bit. Make sure it's up as far as it's supposed to go. See, I still got to turn it a ways. Just enough so that it hangs on there. And then from then, it's pretty straightforward. You can just kind of gauge your clearance. As you can see, I don't have that much clearance, but I do have enough. And you can just kind of make it even, or some people, I would actually recommend this, have more of a gap maybe down here if you can make one, in case you get like junk, like when you're riding, if you get mud or something between your fender and your tire. These specific fenders have a feature, and there's another company too in Germany. They have these kind of fenders. They have these plastic kind of fittings so that you can pull this out. This is actually held in here, but you can pull it out to clean behind the fenders, whatever, if you get junk in there. So basically, after this one's done. All I have to do is tighten my my screws and that, and the front wheel there is done. One more thing I can mention: when you tighten these stays, make sure that your fender is centered. I mean, this might sound like a no-brainer, but in this case, this is kind of unique. And even I just discovered this now. These things kind of move a bit, so basically make sure that they're straight, going straight out of these little plastic fittings to help calibrate your the center line of your fenders to the center line of your tire. Okay, for the rear fender, it's going to be a bit more, I wouldn't say complicated, but it's going to take a little more attention to locate this. And just to show you a little thing I had to do because it's not compatible with my frame. This originally came with like a little spring, this piece of spring steel that was riveted on. I had to take a pliers and basically twist this off so that it would clear my kickstand installation. In this case, the little cross piece there is not like a round piece like on a conventional bicycle frame, so I wasn't really able to use this clip, but that doesn't matter. I'm going to reuse the screw that I had from my old fender setup and put it in here. I'm also going to actually use one of those washer from my hardware that came with this because this slotted hole is actually bigger than the slotted hole on my old set of fenders. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm just going to attach that and just kind of hang this in position. Okay, as you can see, I hope, I got that screw on there. I snugged it on. I got it, the fender, I got it down as far as it's going to go in that slot. But what I'm going to do now, I'm going to actually take a piece of electrical tape and I'm going to put it in this area. And this is just my idea for doing this. But it worked the last time with my other fenders, so I'm going to do it again. But before I do that, I'm going to take the fastener that I had before. I'm going to put it back in this hole, this threaded insert. And then what I'm going to do is, like I said, I'm going to put that electrical tape here, and then I'm going to kind of press this up to that, and hopefully it'll make an indentation in that area with the tape so that I can actually locate where I want to drill my hole. And I'm going to drill that with my little hand drill. Another good idea why I use that electrical tape is if I'm going to drill into this plastic, especially from the top, if I didn't have something like that tape, your drill is going to walk around on this smooth kind of plastic, and you don't really want to ruin the finish on these fenders. So the next scene you'll see, hopefully I'll have all that done. Okay, I hope I'm not insulting anyone's intelligence, but I thought I would show this little part too. This is what I did. Like I said, don't hurt yourself. Now, you could put this fender on maybe some kind of surface or put something underneath it. What I did is I very, very carefully held it between my knees, and then I started my pilot hole here, and then I'm going to use I used a bigger size. I may even go to a slightly bigger size, but as you can see, I got the hole there, and when my hand drill burst through the plastic, I didn't have to worry about scratching this because the tape also works as a protectant there. But that's what I'm going to do. Maybe open that up a little more, then I'm going to see if everything lines up. Okay, just to show you my initial screw hole was off a bit. I don't know how, maybe I misgauged it, because when I look at the bottom here, as you can see, that's not anywhere near the hole. Now what I could do, I have two choices. I could just basically measure from here to here to find my new hole here, and then cover up this hole whether I want to cover it up with maybe another screw from the inside or just some black electrical tape, or you might be able to, I was even thinking of cutting these slots or whatever and just having like a screw with a big covering strip or washer, but I knew from experience that I don't have much room to work with because I have this rack that is barely going to clear this fender. So what I think I'm going to do, I'm just going to find the correct position of that hole and re-drill the hole, and this time I'll have it the right distance. Okay, I went through that process again, and as you can see, the second time I got both things lined up, and I covered that hole, the first hole, just with a piece of electrical tape. If you can see that, let me show you. I mean, you really can't see it too much, but maybe down the road if I find some little rubber grommet or something, I'll plug that hole, but really it's just a minor little thing. But it still looks pretty nice and clean though so far. Okay, one thing I want to show you after I've attached my two screws, make sure that your wheel will go back on with your fenders on. Naturally, mine does. Some people, they might put fenders on, and then if you have a quick release wheel, you may have more difficulty putting it on and removing it. I didn't, so I'm pretty safe. I'm by no means done. I have to locate or line up all these stays. I also had to put the rack on. I just kind of put a rag on top here because it's kind of going to be kind of tricky for me to do that, and things will be moving around and I don't want to scratch up the finish on these plastic fenders, so I thought I'd show you that quick. Just to show you that you should always have extra hardware, you may need it. I originally wanted to reuse these screws, but then I didn't realize on my old fenders I just had this one hoop that meets at this little hoop here, so that's just that one thickness. And on my new fenders I have these two stays, so these things have to be on top of each other, and then I have the rack thickness, so I have to go to a longer screw. And I dug these up out of my little stock of hardware, and if they're a little too long, like in the case of here, I don't want that going into the gear cluster there, hitting that. I can always put some washers or something on the outside of that. So those are the little problems you may have to deal with when you exchange accessories like this. Okay, I want to show you this as close as I can. These are the new screws. I use like 3 washers to fill out this space so that it wouldn't go through outside the frame part. I shifted the bike to the lowest cog, and you kind of test it, because like I said, you don't want a screw interfering with that, even when you shift and you're up, even maybe when it's running in that cog, but you also want to do it while you're actually shifting down, because it's gonna, if you obviously know the nature of shifting on a derailleur, it's gonna go a little bit farther out before it catches in the lowest cog. So you don't want any mechanical interference there. And the other side is not nearly a problem. Sure, it sticks out a little bit, but that's actually kind of good. It'll give you extra stability. If you have these kind of 2-piece stays, I kind of have each one, like the one's farthest back, I have like closest to the frame, and then this other one I have outside of that, and I have that on both sides. It just makes it's going to make it easier to center this when you're completely done. Another thing that you want to recheck, even you haven't, maybe the last thing you want to do is adjust these, but you still want to recheck your ability to remove and put on your rear wheel. Like I said, in my case, I have like no room from underneath the rack to the top of this fender. I'm as far as I can up as I can go. So let's retest that. Okay, see, it comes off, so I know I'm safe. I have enough room to work there. Just to show you the what I have to work with here, I am barely at the limits as to how I can mount this. These straps I have as far back as they will go and still have this rack be almost level to what I want. But my mounting screws are pretty much, these back ones are pretty much touching the fender. I do have an adequate amount of clearance at the closest part here to the tire. But now I could take these rear screws off and get a little more clearance, but that, in my mind, that would compromise the stability of this rack mounting. Otherwise it would just kind of move around with just these two. So I have all four. I'm going to keep all four. Okay, the final adjustments on these fenders, I lined up the center line of the fenders with the back, the rear tire. Then I tightened these finally. Got things as even as I could get them. As you can see, I don't have that much clearance, but I have, you know, a pretty good amount for my purposes here. This isn't a mountain bike or something. Some final things too. Go through when you reattach your brake linkages. Put the bike off your stand. I assume you're using a stand. It's kind of hard to do it without it. Retighten your quick releases. Make sure everything is lining up. Then, as said, test your shifting and your braking. And in my case, when I did the front, I had somehow moved this. When I reattached my linkage, this had moved up to rubbing the tire, so I had to readjust that. I was wondering why I couldn't really spin the wheel. It was rubbing, so somehow it had moved, so I had to readjust that. Other than that, it's pretty much done. What I would recommend, take your time. It might seem easy depending on what kind of bike you have. This is a more difficult bike because of the nature of the frame. Another thing I would recommend, when you're doing this, show you my hand cleaner. I got my hands dirty like 3 or 4 times when I was working anywhere near my chain, and I mostly had to clean them while I was making this video because I didn't want my camera to get dirty. But I would allow a couple hours to do this job. That's about how long it took me. Takes me longer because I was actually doing all the scenes for the video. But as you can see, the bike is looking pretty sharp. My next video, I'm actually going to show this bike and do a little show and tell with all my accessories added. It's an excellent bike. So I hope you got something out of this video, and good luck and happy riding. Bye for now.